Love that video. Never get bored of it. Good evening, Mark. How are you doing this week?
Hi, Ollie. I'm really good. I find myself dancing. It's a bit of an embarrassment. Did a bit of dad dancing here at home to the video.
Hi, everybody that's watching from home. Really excited this evening. Our show's all about being a successful middle leader. We're going to do things slightly differently tonight, Mark, aren't we? We've got a panel discussion. We've got 3 fantastic guests across 2 different schools. I'll just do a really quick introduction of who our guests are. So we've got Niall Statham, who is SLT and Head of P at Heartland International School in Dubai. You can find him online at Niall Statham. We've also got from Heartland International School as well, Year 4 leader Hayley Pearce, currently doing her MPQML. You can find her online at MissP_DXB. And then from my own stomping ground, we've got Vicky Juett, Head of Humanities at the British International School of Abu Dhabi, and you can find her online at the Juett.
Brilliant. I'm really excited about the show tonight, Ollie, and what's been lovely, actually. I can't believe we're already this far through into our 2nd season. It feels like only 2 minutes ago we were having started our conversations about season 2, what the episodes would look like, and then we had this crazy idea we should maybe think about having a conference, and that's all coming together really, really nicely, isn't it? Super excited about the conference. If you haven't seen what we're planning, here's another little video to wet your whistle. So absolutely, really, really, really looking forward to this on the 16th of October. Massive thanks. The platform we use and the things we put together do cost me and Ollie a bit of money. So we have got some sponsorship to support us with the event that we're doing on the day. And really proud to be being supported by Classroom.Cloud. We're also being supported by Guess and by National Online Safety and Teach Middle East magazine as well, which is, I think, Ollie, actually it's a really lovely endorsement that particularly Guess and Teach Middle East magazine, given their prominence in the region, I think it's so lovely that they are supporting us with our endeavours, because so we didn't get into doing this to try and make any money. We just wanted to try and find and use social media to sort of help everybody and share in issues that are surrounding the region. So it's just lovely that Guess and Teach Middle East are joining us and supporting us alongside National Online Safety and, of course, our major sponsor, Classroom.Cloud. We're looking to sort of wrap things up and tie the agenda up over the course of the next week. So there's still a chance, if you want to have a chance of speaking at the event, then please do visit LearnLiveUAE.com. And we can try and squeeze into our already pretty packed agenda. And if that's something that's of interest to you, then we are trying to get as broad and diverse a range of voices and speakers for the event from the region. So please do visit LearnLiveUAE.com in order to fill in the application form if you are interested in speaking. The agenda, as I say, will be announced by us on our show next week. But yeah, really, really excited. It's coming together really well, isn't it, Ollie?
Yeah, and just, to add to what you've said there, to have the backing of the fantastic group of people that kind of align to our vision of what we want to achieve, of connecting and collaborating with people, is really great, and it feels like a great bit of validation there. But not only that, it's the the classroom or corridor conversation, so to speak, that we have with people, the guests behind shows, that also validate those ideas that we have of trying to actually achieve. Hearing from such a diverse range of people across the region, we have little pockets of things where, for example, the UAE Research Schools Network, but to be able to do that on a slightly more open and larger scale has been fantastic and great to actually share learning from educators across the MENA region. So super excited for what lies ahead for the 16th.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, Ollie. And whilst we're here, should we just have a quick wetting of the whistle for live viewers of who our next two guests are going to be on the next 2 week shows and then run up to the conference?
Well, we've got a few more shows lined up. We've got a researcher teacher show. So we've got David Pedder lined up, who is he works at the Emirates College, and is an educational researcher by trade. So really looking forward to having that kind of dialogue and open discussion and debate with him about how we can access educational research and make it tangible and work for us in the classroom. We also have lined up, by popular demand, Tom Sherrington, author of not only The Learning Rainforest, but Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction, along with I'm trying to think of walkthroughs and a whole host of books. So, really excited to have those people lined up for the show to share and engage in debate with teachers from across the region.
Yeah, really, really excited about the conference and our next two guests. And as a duo who try to be responsive to the needs of the region as well, if you've got any ideas for shows that you feel would be relevant to teachers and leaders from across the region, please do get in touch with us, either via the LearnLiveUAE.com site, or actually Ollie and I are very easily accessible through our two Twitter accounts, at ICT Evangelist and at OLewis_coaching. But I think we probably talked ourselves enough now, Ollie. Should we bring in our guests? I'll bring our guests in now. Here we go. So it's a big welcome to Niall Statham and Hayley Pearce and Vicky Juett. Thank you so much for joining us today on Learn Live UAE. How are you all doing? How are you doing, Neil?
Yeah, doing great. It's great to be back in school. Great to have kids in the building again, and we're about 4 weeks into it now, so we're finding our feet and hitting our stride again. So yeah, happy to be here, and even more glad that we're not following Tom Sherrington because he'll be that'll be some interview, I'm sure.
Really looking forward to that. How are you today, Hayley? How are things going with you at work?
Yes, very good. Same as Neil, really. Just glad to be back in the classroom. To have the children back in front of me rather than through the computer screen, which was just tough to get through. So really glad to be here today as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, Hayley. And Vicky, so can I just start by asking, can you give me the lowdown on what Ollie's actually... I'm joking. Thank you so much, Vicky, for joining us today as well from BISAD as well. How are things with you, Head of Humanities? How are things for you in your department and at the school?
Yeah, really good at the minute. Today was our first day for actually having live kids in senior school back in the building. So it's been like quite a hectic, mad run up to that, but it was so lovely to see them all again, and just to walking around an empty school just doesn't feel right. So it's been a really great day today. I think we're all a little bit tired and a bit like, oh, so exciting, but yeah, it's been really good.
That's so fantastic to hear. Ollie, are you ready with the first question for our guests?
Yeah, obviously we've given you a very brief introduction, but could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in education so far? If we start with Vicky first, please.
Sure. So I started teaching in the UK about 13 years ago. And I was a teacher for a year, and then I became a middle leader. So I've been a middle leader for what appears to be ever. I worked in the UK for about 3 years and then moved to Singapore, and I worked there until last year in a private international school in Singapore. I started off as a teacher, then became the head of geography and then the head of humanities, amongst a few other roles. And since then came to BISAD last summer, and I'm the head of humanities there and loving it.
Should we go to Hayley next, please?
So I am currently in my 8th year of teaching, moved to Dubai in 2015. Said I'm coming for 2 years and then now going into my 6th year here. I think that's like many people that come over here. Been at Heartland since it opened, so seen some huge changes in the school from there. And this is my first year of middle leader, and I think I'm currently, I think it's week 5, so week 5 of middle leader, so I'm very, very new, but really enjoying the role. Teach primary, so currently year 4 leader, but I've taught across all primary ages from year 1 to year 6. But yes, that's me.
And finally to Neil.
Hi everyone, my name is Niall Statham. I have been teaching for, I was trying to count them. I'm going to abandon the number of years teaching and just leave it, comfortably teaching for a while now. I've been in various leadership roles, I think, for the last 8 years now, leading PE in primary school, then into through school, leading on specific subjects, PSHE, for example, and I'm on a secondment at the moment into senior leadership at Heartland International School. So a part of that has been innovation and some of the ed tech that's taken us through distance learning, and then some other things as well, like whole school student leadership. And in my, you might not guess it looking at me now, but a few years and kilos ago, I had a somewhat successful rugby career as well, and I captained the UAE rugby 15s team and 7-a-side team, which hopefully gives me a different angle on leadership experience to talk about this evening.
That's really interesting. Some of the best books I've read in recent years about leadership have actually been from previous sort of coaches and sports players. It's been really interesting to read those things. So it'd be really good to hear your insights around sort of that link to education, but obviously with a sporting slant as well, Neil. Thank you, all three of you, for your responses there. Jumping on to one of the first questions, I'm going to jump, Ollie, on to question 3 as it goes. I think it ties in quite nicely to the conversation we were just having. Can I start with you, please, Vicky, if that's all right? And what advice would you give to someone looking to step up into middle leadership?
I think just for me, I heard this really good pearl of wisdom on a course that I went on, and it was about that leadership is about practice. And they sort of made the analogy of it being like yoga, that you practice and you practice and practice, and hopefully you get better and better and better at it. So don't be put off at first of applying for a leadership role if you don't have any experience, because I think it's the kind of the industry that we work in. You learn really, really fast, obviously, as we've all done in the last sort of few months. But just educate yourself. I think to be a credible leader, you need to be quite well read. And you need to sort of keep up to date with stuff that's happening in schools and in educational theory, and just, work hard. People respect you if you work hard, and they're more inclined to kind of get on board with the stuff that you're doing and work with you if they see you sort of pulling your weight as well.
Yeah, that definitely goes to that whole sort of walking the walk, not just talking the talk approach, doesn't it? Absolutely. Thank you for that. Hayley, how about yourself on that question?
Yeah, I think just trying to find kind of the role that you're interested in. Myself personally, I knew that I wanted to go into a middle leadership role, but perhaps wasn't sure at the beginning what particular role I was looking for. So just finding out what kind of role you want. Is it a subject role? Is it a kind of pastoral role? I guess that depends on what kind of school you're in, but also whether you are a subject specialist teacher or a primary teacher, like myself. And I think just finding somebody that's in the school already who perhaps has a middle leader role or has a role that you are interested in, kind of shadow what they're doing, or see what the role entails. So ask some questions. They've obviously been in it. They know what to expect. So shadow them, see what you can learn from them. It's really important. And then I think for me personally, more recently, I've kind of been more into the Twitter side, the educational side, and there's so many great people that you can follow on there and find out things about. So that's definitely something to latch onto and use.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of great advice being shared by many people, and there's so much great reading out there as well. Before we went live, we were discussing Andy Buck's Leadership Matters book, which is a great book to sort of dip into and refer to around leadership. Jumping to you, Neil, same question. So when it comes to thinking about being a middle leader, and what advice would you give to someone looking to step up about how to go about it and all things sort of surrounding that? Because sometimes it's about knowing that you're ready, feeling right, that you're ready to do it in yourself, isn't it? Teachers suffer massively from imposter syndrome. And what advice would you give, Neil?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the feeling of imposter syndrome, for sure. I think my key piece of advice would be is that you have to make sure that you have your why, first of all. And I think, it's easy in school and in career to sort of think of this as a conveyor belt process, and first you become a teacher and then you become a year group leader, and then everyone has to follow this set path. And some people never step on that path, and they're quite happy being a fantastic teacher, which is brilliant. And I think if you decide that you want to go into leadership, you have to have your reason why. Why is it that you're doing that? Is it to develop yourself? Is it to develop people? Is it to develop a subject or an idea that you've got that you're convinced is right? But I think you have to be secure in yourself in what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it. And it might sound like cliche advice, but then I think the journey into leadership becomes a lot more straightforward after that. I think once you have your ideas and your beliefs and you sort of get the confidence of conviction in them, it becomes much more easier to lead people. And I would also say, try and spend as much time as you can around great teachers and great leaders. I think Hayley touched on the role model subject there, but I'm learning lessons in leadership every single day. It doesn't matter how long I do it for, and if there's a decision that you might have made, or I try and imagine myself making a challenging decision and ask why. If I would have concluded something different, I try to always find out what was the thought process behind that decision. Why did you do what you did? Or when faced with a difficult decision, what is it that you're weighing up in your head, and try and by osmosis and just be a sponge around these great people. And lastly, make sure that you're confident in what it is you're doing as well, and spend time learning your craft. I was really fortunate teaching in Scotland to start off with. There were two absolute titans of the subject in my department, and I spent every minute that I could in their lessons watching them, making sure that I was secure in my my day-to-day craft, and tried to be excellent in what it was I was doing, the sort of the bread and butter of teaching and teaching PE before I wanted to step further into leadership. So a kind of a trifecta of advice there for you.
It's great to see. Sorry, Mark. I was just going to say it's great to see the kind of the discussion go full circle there with sort of starting about honing practice with Vicky and coming back round to the response there of spend time with those around you that are great at what they do, but alongside that, knowing that you have this guiding mission, whether it is to improve the pupil outcomes in a particular subject, or you want to play a pastoral role, or you want to grow and develop others. So it's great to see those responses and parallels between the three of you. We've had a comment come in from Jane. Thank you, Jane. As a middle leader, how do we identify teachers that have the potential to improve, or teachers who cannot improve and need to be replaced? I'll open this one up for debate if anyone would like to jump in.
I mean, it's a big old question that I'm going to try and dive headlong into it. And I think for me, it's about trying to develop people. And I think the moment that you think you've identified someone that can't improve, you do have a problem on your hands. But I would bounce it back a little bit and say, what would you do in a situation where you had a student and you thought, I don't know if we'd ever give up on a student like that. And you said maybe give up's a bit strong, but we would never say that someone can't improve. And I think being a good leader for me is about trying to develop people, and it's about trying to help people. For me, it would be a kind of redoubling your efforts on that. And there's always a way that you can help someone improve. they would have to want to get better themselves for sure. But I think I would apply that similar logic really that you would do if you had a student who you were struggling to improve. You wouldn't, you would find what it was that motivates them. Or I would go back to my starter for 10, which is you have to find the why. And if you don't have a why, then it's going to be difficult. Once you can find the why, then the path forward is there.
It goes quite. Sorry, Vicky, carry on.
I was going to say, I think you also need to be supported with really good processes as well, having kind of managed people through performance management systems and things like that. If you've got a parallel system that supports teachers who are struggling or who aren't really achieving good pupil outcomes, I think if the school that you work in has a really good process of dealing with that, of trying to help them and to take all of those steps that Neil was talking about in a kind of fair and documented and really sort of kind way. If it's still not working out once you've gone through that process, then I think you've got your answer then, haven't you? That, you've tried everything you can. And, if the person isn't able to take that on board and to develop themselves, then it's kind of time for them to go.
Yeah, I concur, and I was going to reflect on that quote, and I'm terrible at quoting things verbatim, but it was Dylan Willem who educators would widely recognise as being leading authority on teaching and learning, and he said that teaching is such a hard job that no matter how hard we try, and it wasn't exactly this, but he said something along the lines of we will never be absolutely brilliant at it. Because there's so much we still need to know about how we learn, how people are, psychology behind it, all of those different things. And so, it's about, like Neil saying, and yourself, Vicky, there, about, I think, about providing those opportunities to be kind and work through those processes to support people when they do need some support. Thank you both for those great comments, and thank you to Jane too for that particular question. We're getting questions from our audience right through, and welcome to long-time supporter, long-time sufferer, Mark Ryan, who is apparently very excited for this chat. He asks, how are middle leaders being supported during these very challenging times with COVID? And I guess that question, and I'm jumping right through to some of the later questions here, but one of the things I found most difficult as a middle leader was balancing the expectations of SLT whilst being really mindful and supportive of the people in my department and my teams and all the rest of it. And you sort of feel like you're pushing that back a little bit from the above, and I was trying to be really supportive underneath. And I'm guessing that links quite nicely into Mark's question here. So I'll jump to you, Vicky, with that one, if that's okay. How do you think middle leaders are being supported during these challenging times with COVID?
It's been quite mental, if I'm honest. I think because we've sort of been pulled in every direction, as you were suggesting there. For myself, I feel that I've been massively supported by my team, and we've had a real sort of camaraderie and just really sort of pulled together. So I'm super, super proud of them. And like every time we talked, somebody was, I've tried this and this has happened. And maybe some days people had like a really tough day for whatever reason, maybe nothing to do with school even, but just to have created a really strong network through social media and just through kind of our day-to-day routines. I have felt massively supported by my team when we've sort of felt quite distant from the physical part of school. Actually, sort of emotionally, we've still felt really strongly a team. So that's probably not what you were expecting, and not perhaps what I was expecting either, but I'm really heartened by it, and I think we're a really much stronger team now as well.
Out of adversity comes strength, doesn't it? Neil, you've been on both sides of of this, really. So you're SLT now, a bit of former middle leader. What would your response to Mark be in relation to what he's saying? And also, how about balancing the pressures from above whilst being supportive of your team as well? What's your response, Neil?
I'm just conscious of what I'm keeping half an eye on Hayley here. As someone who I've hopefully been working through that process with, so if she starts shaking her head, just kill my microphone. I think in times like this, I kind of relate this to sport. I think people think that in times of pressure, when it gets difficult, people think that they need to throw the Hail Mary in American football. They need to do something completely out of the box. But really, when we're trying to get schools back to normal, what you want is teachers teaching with children. You want great teachers spending as much time as possible with great children doing the core business of teaching them. So for me, for our team, we tried to spend as much time as we could looking at the logistics and the how-tos. I think when you just have to flick on the news or go on tests and look at some of the articles and the problems that people are facing, that how am I supposed to, how can I do this and how can I do that? And I think we have tried as best we could to take away as many of those how questions and let teachers focus on what they do best. And I think there also has to be acknowledgement that you can sit and plan this in a room. And one of the things I've got written on my board behind me, which is something that I do believe in, is that sometimes your ideas are not the best ideas, and that goes for all levels of leadership. And there are things that we thought we planned perfectly, and then I think you can never be too proud to go to the people who are on the ground implementing it, living it day in, day out, and ask them if it's working. And if they tell you no, you have to be willing to listen to them and willing to accept that it's maybe you didn't call this one right.
Yeah, I'd agree with you both completely there. I think it comes down to relationships, doesn't it? And part of that is the culture within your school and being able to have that honest, open dialogue and feedback, no matter if it's horizontally or vertically within your school. It reminds me a little bit of Neil. You've probably read this, Legacy by James Kerr. To kind of go down the sporting avenue, one of the things that the All Blacks focus on is the little things, and it's those accumulation of all of the little things that you do that build up to improving the bigger picture, not only for the teacher but for the middle leader as well as the senior leaders. So I think that's a really important point to sort of take there, and I hope that helps to add to your great responses there to Mark's question. I'm going to change tact ever so slightly and come to you, Hayley. As a middle leader, how do you go about growing all of the members in your team? What sort of strategies have you got planned for, and have you been using in the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, so I think obviously you need to get to know your team first of all. The team that I'm working with have both been at the school before, but I haven't necessarily worked closely with them. So just getting to know them first of all, and kind of working out what do they want to improve, how can we improve the team in general, are there things that are working, what's not working, so to grow the team, and then what do they want to improve, so do they have some areas like we were saying before. I think everyone, no matter how long you've been teaching for, no matter how long you've been in leadership for, you can always find something to improve on, no matter how big or small that improvement is, and kind of letting them work with you. Well, how are you going to achieve that goal? And just take risks as well. I think it's quite important. It's one of our kind of attributes at Heartland of risk taking, and let them go with that. If they've got a great idea, let them try it and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we come back to it and try the next thing to help them and the team grow.
Ollie seems to be distracted. I think he's tweeting about what you're saying there, Hayley. Thank you so much for that. I completely agree. And it goes back to what Ollie was saying a second ago. I think about relationships as well, and this links into research from Hattie. And it's interesting when we as educators, we often look at research when in relation to children, but we forget sometimes that our colleagues are human as well. And so the things which we read in research which are related to children often relate directly to what we're doing with our colleagues and parents in the community, and relationships are central to everything. So that's some fantastic advice there, Hayley. Thank you very much. Vicky, have you got any response to the same question about how you go about growing members in your team? You shared a moment ago about how fantastically the rapport and the relationships have been with your team since you started working at BISAD. Have you got any advice about how to go about growing members so that you can create that sort of culture you talked about?
Yeah, I think for me, I think probably one of the best CPD things I've sort of ever done in my teaching career is I trained with CTI as a life coach. And that's really, really informed my leadership practice, in that I have learned sort of techniques and ways to really get to understand people's values and really speak to their values. And I think once you sort of understand, sort of as Hayley said, once you understand your people, you can really understand, you know, what their hopes and what their vision for their own futures is, and you can sort of help them to realise that within the school. I think for me, there's a thing, I think it's in the Sheryl Sandberg book about women, that the best kind of women leaders are the women that lean back and pull other women forward. And I've sort of tried to apply that ethos to everyone within my team, that, you know, I don't have some sort of ego situation that I think that I always need to be in charge or the best. What gives me the greatest satisfaction is seeing other people grow and seeing them sort of contribute more and more to the school and get themselves into leadership roles and that sort of thing. So I'm always sort of trying to look for ways to help people find like CPD or find experiences or opportunities for them to try new things. So I think that's really, really important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Vicky. Neil, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they have to be, for any kind of development to happen in your team, I think people have to feel in your team like they're a stakeholder in some sense to the vision that you're trying to achieve. So I think of departments that I've worked in that have gone well, and there's always been a shared sense of purpose there. And I think in good times or bad, we've always been able to come back to the core driver, which you would revisit every difficult decision. You go back to your core principles, which everyone has bought into, everyone has developed together. And I think if people feel that, then there's clarity of where you're going. There's autonomy there for people to develop, the vision that they were part of. And I think when you have that, you can start to push people as well to, you start to, then you build that professional trust, because it is a team. They're part of the team. They're not just a member. They're a working part of it. And then, Hayley's hopefully a great example. Given a little nudge to come on here this evening. And I think once you get to know those people, like Vicky was talking about, what motivates them, what drives them, you find out why it is they're doing what they're doing, you can start to guide them towards opportunities. And then I think hopefully that's where the magic starts to happen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Neil. You okay for the next question, Ollie?
Yeah, I was just trying to get a tweet out, but we're there. So let's draw on a little thread there then that some of you have mentioned. Let's say that you identify that there's a need to build trust then within the members or a member of your team. What actions might you undertake to start fostering that trust, either amongst the person or the team as a whole?
I'll jump in.
Sorry.
I think you have to lead by example. So if you need to be the leader that your team want you to be, and again, linking it back to those relationships, once you've built those effective relationships with your team, hopefully that trust just naturally begins to kind of grow. And once they see that you're leading as they would hope or they would want you to lead, everything just kind of comes together. You communicate with them, you make sure that, like we've mentioned, that you give them opportunity to grow, you give them opportunity to try things out, to take risks, and then hopefully all of those things just kind of combine, and that trust just kind of naturally grows within what you're doing as with you and the team.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hayley. Vicky, what's your response to that?
I think sometimes I totally agree with what Hayley said. I think it's really important to kind of build that trust. But I think sometimes it's really helpful. Like, I've only been at BISAD for just over a year now, to start by establishing norms. and to establish, like in meetings and things like that, and when you have kind of one-to-ones with staff, that they know that your discussions are confidential, and that you know that you've got their back and you want the best for them. So I think that I wouldn't feel awkward now. I think perhaps when I first started off as a leader, I felt a bit weird about like, oh, should we establish some norms for how we're going to go on? But I don't feel that anymore. I think that's a real good way to create coherence and trust, and that what Neil was talking about, that kind of shared vision earlier. And I think if people feel comfortable and confident, and they know that they're respected, and that you know what in our department meetings, what's discussed in our team is kind of confidential, and that makes everyone feel happy and comfortable to share what they feel they need to share.
So how do you go about building that in your discussions then, Vicky? Do you state outwardly that they're confidential, or do you is that made really clear and explicit in the conversations that you have?
Yeah, definitely. I think in that, again, sort of part of my coaching training, that you always begin a coaching meeting by re-establishing the norms and saying, you know, anything that's aired today sort of stays within these four walls, and then people are confident to be honest. But we sort of have a caveat that if you're going to bring problems to the table, then it should be a solution focus. It should be asking for help and asking for other people's experience and direction. And I think that creating that sort of collaborative trust is a really good way to sort of just create a really good atmosphere that's really positive. So even if negative things are being talked about, it's done so in a way that we're looking to move forward from this, rather than dwell on like what we're upset about or what's not working.
That's great advice. Thank you very much, Vicky. Neil, what are your thoughts on that?
I've written down a quote. It was one of my few quotes I'm going to use, because I try not to go for I think sometimes you can get hooked into a really good leadership quote that you think is inspirational, but the practical applications sometimes are a bit harder. But it's an Angela Merkel one, and she says, much better to talk to one another than about one another. And that's one that really rings true to me, because I think the times where I've been unhappiest in my life or in my career is sort of when there's been a sense of ambiguity, where either you don't know where you stand with someone, or you don't know what's coming next, so that uncertainty. And I think you have to get to a point in your team where you feel comfortable disagreeing with each other. And I think when people feel safe, when people start to feel safe and that trust is there, then the discussions are just so much better. And I think you have to work through that together and have frank but fair discussions where you can say, we had one in our team the other day where I had an idea that I thought was great, and actually nobody else thought it was great, and we didn't do it, and that's fine, because I think if you get that culture right, then people in all directions of you, up, down, and to the side, can say to you exactly how they're feeling, and as long as it's reciprocal. So I think you have to encourage that with the people who are around you, and perhaps the people who are working as part of your team to start with, and you have to invite their feedback on. And then in the first instance of criticism, or in the instances where they maybe don't like what you're doing, you have to show them that they're willing to listen to it as well. Because I think if you ask people for feedback and you never listen to it, it very quickly becomes not authentic, and then there's a danger that people don't tell you what they really think or what they really feel, and then things stop getting better. So I promise no more. Hopefully, no more cliches and no more quotes. But I think you have to strive for those honest, open, frank conversations in all directions as often as you can.
Thank you for that, Neil. And I really like the fact that it goes back to that the thing that was talked about earlier about sort of leadership by example, because you're taking on board the feedback from your colleagues. You had this great idea to whatever it was, do whatever you thought you thought was a great idea, but to listen to your colleagues and then respond to that in a positive way, and then not do it because of the advice shared within your team it's just a great example of leadership. And with that, I'm just going to disappear for a second.
I just want to pick up on a thread there that we're kind of talking about it we're talking about a dimension of it without sort of acknowledging it. What would your top tips be then for running a successful department meeting? If everyone could just kind of give your top 2 tips. If we'll go along the top and down to Vicky at the end. So Neil, if you want to start.
I think you need to get your person who's really keen on your processes and procedures in charge of your minutes, and you have to get your attention to detail person onto your minutes. And although I like to think I am an attention to detail person, I think there's a long-suffering member of our team last year, Yaz, and she was the champion of the agenda, and whatever we were discussing, it was always her job to try and bring it back round to the agenda and to bring it back round to focusing on what it was we were supposed to be doing. And that leads us to point number 2, which I think is something I'm guilty of. I hold my hands up. Is that I find myself philosophizing a lot, probably doing it now in meetings. I think Vicky touched on it earlier on, where it's easy when you're discussing a process or how you want to do something that before you know it, you can find yourself talking about, in an ideal world we would do this, or wouldn't it be great, or it's annoying that we can't. I think you have to try and, as often as you can, keep bringing it back round to, okay, so what are we going to do? So how are we going to do it? And as many of those refocusers as you can. They would be my 2 bits of advice.
That's great, thank you. Hayley, we come to you next, please.
I think enabling or having enough time to do the collaboration side of things. So whether you're trying to make changes to something or you are having to discuss something that you're wanting to do or change in your team, just having enough time set aside during that meeting to collaborate and to work on that is point number 1, but also keeping it concise and to the point, not having a meeting for the sake of a meeting and trying to drag it out if you don't need to have everybody there, if it's not a good use of their time. If it can be done and finished within 10-15 minutes and that's all it needs to be, then I think, yeah, keeping it to the point and making sure that when there is time for that collaboration and that sharing of ideas, to make sure that you have enough time to do that in that meeting.
Great, thank you. Vic?
100% agree on the not wasting people's time in meetings. I think we've all been in enough of them in the past. It's like, I won't be here anymore. So yeah, I really agree with that. I think for me, I'm always, if you can send it in an email, send it in an email. Don't waste people's time with a meeting. And I always try, like when I'm sort of thinking about our next kind of department meetings, I'm thinking, is this really focused on improving learning? And are we thinking about teaching and learning here? Or is this just process and just things that are wasting people's time, really? I think, yeah, just go for an email if it's process stuff, and just try and keep meetings focused on, what are we as a team doing to improve learning and how we get in there and how we making it stick as well. Because I think, the longer you are within the school system, you've sort of seen all these innovations and great ideas come and go. But really, to make people feel really satisfied in what they're doing, they need to be able to see it actually in reality and to see it every day and think, yeah, that's really good. I was a part of making that happen. So yeah, try and make it stick and make it about improving teaching and learning.
That's a great point that you've made there, Vic. I know that you'll testify to this. We use Office 365, and the Planner app is such a useful. She's giggling. She knows, all that processy stuff can just be done through the Planner app, and that frees up your time to actually spend it on what will make more of a difference, which is, focusing on teaching and learning and professional development within your teams. And that's such a rich use of your time as a team that, if you can make and harness tools like that to get rid of all the processy things and email them out. It's far easier. And we've had a question come in from Danielle. Thanks for tuning in, Danielle. Middle leaders under so much pressure to show impact. How do you think the best way to achieve this quickly is? Vic, we'll come back to you because you went last time, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think data is the key to this. Find out what's the biggest need. And then usually if you find the biggest need, then the steps that you take to ameliorate an issue with that, or to create a better condition for those students, will sort of, it naturally kind of follows that will show the biggest improvement. And again, don't try and do too much. I think especially like reflecting on myself, as when I first became a middle leader, my department development plans were about 16 pages long, and I just wanted to change the world and do everything, and you're at real risk of burning out yourself when you can't prioritize those things. But certainly for me, data is the key. Just look at your students' data, look at your teachers' data, and then you'll find the gaps that the biggest gaps that need to be closed, and that will give you the biggest win, I think, in terms of sort of proving yourself and actually demonstrating an impact.
That's really interesting. I think you're absolutely right on that front, Vicky. Jumping to you for a second, Hayley, because say you may well be in this position right now, being new to the role. Niall will be able to sort of tell me whether or not it's true or not, but there may be some pressure on you to show impact really, really quickly. And certainly, having both been interviewed for middle leader roles and having interviewed people who are applying for middle leader roles, one of those questions is often, how can you show impact in your first month, your first 100 days, all those sorts of things as well. How are you finding that sort of pressure around that sort of question for yourself?
So I think just in general, I think only being 5 weeks into the role, I think just generally I feel quite a bit of pressure on, am I doing the right thing, and is this the right way to go? And so I think that's just me as a person. I'm quite a bit of a worrier and want to make sure I'm doing things the right way. So for me, I think there is some pressure, but also I think SLT have been quite good in making sure that we're all well supported to be able to show that impact as and when we need to. I think Neil touched on it before. At the moment, we're trying to get the children back into the classroom, back comfortable, making sure that they're safe, that their well-being's looked after, and that's kind of what we're working on at this present moment in time. And then we'll start to bring in all the other kind of side of it, the educational side, and making sure that everybody's making the correct progress. And then that's when I think there'll be a bit more pressure coming on to me, and I'll have to kind of work with my team to make sure that we can show that progress. I think having had however long it was now, 6 months out of the classroom, I think you're always kind of trying to find ways to bridge that gap that perhaps has kind of grown between some of the children during that time. So I'm pretty sure as the year progresses, there'll be more pressure put onto me. But I think at the moment, we're just focusing on making sure that those children are safe and their well-being's looked after.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for that response, Hayley. I'm just going to jump onto another question now, if that's all right, because I'm mindful. I said time flies. We're down to 12 minutes left on the show, and so yeah, we've still got a lot of things we'd like to try and get through. I'm going to pose this question to Neil, if that's okay, Neil. Delegation. I'm going to combine two questions here, actually. Delegation is an important part of the role of a leader in sharing the workload and all the things that need to be worked on and all of these things. So what, first of all, can middle leaders do to make their delegation more effective? And then sort of following on from that, one of the, and this has been a conversation I've had many times over the years, but in your view, do you think it's like a head of department's responsibility to create a scheme of work for every class, or a scheme of learning for every class? Or is that something that should be delegated and shared out? And if you think it is something that should be done by a middle leader for every class, how do you manage that workload? And if not, say, how do you go about delegating that sort of thing out to your teams? Sorry for the big question, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, you've tossed me a mass, not just a single, but a double there. I'll try and go through it in reverse order, if that's all right. I don't think it's the job of the department head to do that. I do think they have to play some role in controlling the vision, because I think like Vicky touched on, you can't do everything all the time. At some point, there has to be a distilling down and a narrowing a little bit, and once you've got the collection of ideas, and I think you give people the autonomy and the freedom to voice what they want to do, and you make them a stakeholder in it. I do think your job does start though at that point of, once you've collected it and there are decisions to make, that's where you know, as a middle leader, you do have to make some of those decisions when faced with equally good options, and that's part of the role. But that's not something that I've ever tried to control. I think when I started as in middle leader in my current role, I think the first thing I did was try to sort of say, look, this is my vision, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and this is where I think we should be going, and this is where I want it to go, and then gather ideas from other people who are there. And then I think once you've got that, the delegation starts to become a little bit easier. And I think you can't get caught in just delegating the tasks that you want to do. Sometimes you have to delegate the things that actually you really like doing, because I think it's about distilled responsibility. And I think going back to one of those the recurring themes that's been through the show is that you should be trying to develop people and develop your team. And to touch on Danielle's question as well, that if you want to show impact, you need to make sure you know your subject, know the people that are working for you, and know what their strengths are. And whilst we're developing weaknesses, you have to help people shine with their strengths as well. And I think different people in your team have got different skills, and good leaders take full advantage of them. They capitalize on the strengths of people in their teams, and they help them to become strengths of everyone as well. And I think you're going to find yourself as a middle leader either giving advice to someone who knows more about it than you, or holding your hands up and saying, actually, I don't know as much about this as you. Would you mind telling me, or would you mind taking a lead on that? And I think that's where it's an attribute of good leaders.
Yeah, that's a great response. Thank you very much, Neil. I really like that sort of shared, I think, distilling of responsibility you said there. And it is difficult to put your hand up and say, I don't know everything about everything, and take on board that. But again, that's that sort of brave leadership, isn't it? Vicky, going on to the same question to you, but how do you sort of go about delegating within your teams? How do you approach that?
I'm terrible at delegating. I'm not terrible at. Well, I suppose I probably am a bit terrible at it. I think what Neil was saying about just finding people's strengths and what they're interested in. I think once you know that, you've got a good idea that you can create opportunities for people with things. So rather than it being like you must do this, you must do that, it's more of is this something that you're interested in doing? I think you'd be really good at it, and kind of giving people those opportunities. But I was really interested in just to curveball you a little bit, about your question about writing schemes of work and stuff, because within my sort of faculty, I've got 6 different subjects. So for me, it's actually impossible to write. I'm not a history subject specialist. I'm not an economics specialist. I'm not a business studies specialist. So I think for me, that's more a question about what does good pedagogy look like? What does good assessment look like? And those are the kind of conversations that I'd rather be having, and then give people, because teachers are really passionate about their subjects as well. And I don't know if this is just humanities thing, but the historians are really excited about history, and I think they'd be really upset if I started trying to write schemes of work for them. I think they'd be very disappointed. So I think that kind of just talking about what does good look like, and giving people a bit more rein, because that's where the passion comes from. I think I've been involved in like standards-based assessments in a previous school, and I think it just completely pulled all the love of the subject out of a lot of teachers, which is not a great thing to see. And so giving people the opportunity to create schemes of learning about their passions and what we as a team think is important, I think it's a really empowering thing to do.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying there as well, and it goes in some way actually with the comment you've made there about playing to the strengths of the subject teachers you have working in your, because I've been in a similar position to yourself, and sort of led in departments where I haven't taught the subject. I think it goes in some way as well to the sort of the fallacies we've discovered over the years with classroom observations as well, hasn't it? It's how can, as a economics and business or a computing expert, how can I, come into your classroom, and I'm assuming from our conversation this evening you're a geography teacher, so how could I come into one of your lessons and proclaim to give you advice on how to teach your subject when I don't really know anything about your subject? It goes to those things, doesn't it, I think? Hayley, how do you feel about this idea of delegation?
I think I'm a bit like Vicky. I think at the moment I'm not very good at sort of delegating tasks and trying to get everything done as I should be doing it. As the Year 4 leader, I need to get all of those tasks done. So it's definitely something that I'm going to try and work on over the rest of my middle leader career. But yeah, definitely try and find, as they've said, the strengths of the people in your team. There's no point in me trying to sit there trying to do something that I have no idea about or I'm not very good at. If somebody can get it done a lot quicker and easier than I can. And also, I think just being clear as well. So this is what we need to do and this is where we want to go as a team, and kind of guiding them and being clear with what kind of your expectations are as well, so that you then don't end up repeating the task yourself a bit later on if it's not quite as you had thought it might have gone. But again, I think that's probably me just needing to let them go with it and kind of delegate. I think that's definitely something that I need to work on.
Mark, I'm mindful of time.
Go on, Ollie.
We've got 4 minutes left. Mindful of the time. We're going to jump to one of the 2 questions that we ask every guest at the end of each show, which is, could you just recommend a non-educational book that's had an impact positively on you as an educator or as a leader, please? We'll go to Neil first, please.
Oh, that's a tough one. I tend to read more. I tend to be a serial Wikipedia trawler, to be honest, and the books I do read, I do delve into the fiction quite a lot. I'll cheat a little bit, and I'm going to say We Need to Speak About Kevin is a book that I carry with me, not physically, but a book that had a profound impact on me, and that was about if you haven't read it, it could be a bit of an arduous read, but that was one about a school tragedy in America, and a difficult home life and difficult circumstances. And I think in the same summer, I read that along with Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night. And the reason I sort of point to those 2 books is just that, everyone is, we visited at the start, it goes for pupils as well. Everyone has their own story. Everyone has their home life. Everyone has their own background. And books like that remind me that, everyone's just trying to do their best, and everyone's just trying to get on in life and be happy. And it's colleagues that you work with, and it's kids at school, and we all have that right to feel like we belong and feel like we're accepted in where we are. And they remind me often to just calm down, stop, think about it, think about the person.
That's a great recommendation. I think one I need to add to my list. Hayley, we could come to you next, please.
A bit like Neil here. That's a bit of a question that I'm a bit like about. Personally, I love to read, but I tend to read kind of romance, crime, fiction books. But I think definitely need to kind of broaden my reading repertoire. So if anybody wants to send me their amazing book recommendations, feel free. I think as a primary school teacher, though, for me, just picture books in general for me, no matter what age the children that you're teaching are, you can always get great reading, great writing, great ideas from a picture book. So I just love to share those with my class and the children that I'm teaching. So not really anything that's had a profound impact on me as an educator necessarily, but just something that I'm quite passionate about. Yeah, any good book recommendations, do send them my way, because I do love to read.
We'll have to send some over to you after the show, Hayley.
Yeah.
How about yourself? How about yourself, Vicky?
I think for me, like, I had a bit of a massive light bulb moment. Before I was a teacher, I worked in all sorts of other various industries, and my sort of conception of what a leader was always quite a kind of masculine thing. And then I read Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and I found out about imposter syndrome, and I was like, oh my God, it's really real. So that, I think, was really important for me. It just really changed me and made me a lot more confident in my leadership. And like anything by Brené Brown, and that whole idea of it's all right to be a vulnerable leader, and it's all right to be, you know, to tell people that you don't know everything and you really need their help. I think that's this kind of leader that I'm really comfortable being, and that I want to be and to be proud of. So yeah, anything by Brené Brown is pretty amazing, really.
Brilliant shares. Thank you so much, Vicky. And I'm just going to jump onto our very final question of the evening. And I'll jump to you first, Hayley, if that's okay. What EdTech tool makes your working life easier, and why? So it could be anything. I'm not going to try and steer you with your response, but what EdTech tool does help you with your work?
I think at the moment, with kind of COVID times, and was recommended by a colleague a website, and I think it's an app as well, called Go Noodle. So it just gives the children brain breaks. They're in their seats pretty much all day, every day, almost every single lesson, and they're finding it really tough. So it's silly, it's crazy. The kids absolutely love it. But just having that time to have a brain break, it makes my life easier, because they can then get on with the work in the next lesson once they've had that moment of being silly and kind of giving them that release of energy that they need. So at the moment, I'm absolutely loving that. But also something that we started using during distance learning, that Neil recommended, was Flipgrid. I'm sure lots of people have been using it as well, but just giving the children the opportunity to record videos, share their work. It was particularly good during the distance learning. There was a couple of children who found it quite difficult to speak in front of other children in the class. They didn't like to share their ideas. However, using this, because nobody else could kind of see them because it was them being recorded, it was just amazing, the things that they were coming out with. So yeah, those are my two for the moment.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you. Both good choices as well. Thank you very much indeed for those, Hayley. And over to you, Vicky, for your choice, please.
My choice is Ollie Lewis. anything that comes from Ollie is usually good. No, but I think for me, like, my lifesaver, I think, during our virtual school experience was quizzes. I know it's not particularly revolutionary, but it's just a really easy to use thing. Time saving. The kids absolutely love it as well. And the fact that you can kind of teleport questions in, you can create really good, easy questions. I love that. But Ollie was talking about earlier as well, the planner thing in Microsoft. I've come from a good school, so this last 12 months has been mental for me, learning all the different kind of Microsoft apps, but I've actually found them really, really good. And my learning curve has been humongous, but that's been a particularly useful thing for me.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah, huge fan of quizzes here, as well as the whole Office 365 suite, to be fair. And it is that there is such a steep learning curve, isn't there? We're trying when you're sort of trying to adopt new ed tech. So you're lucky to have Ollie there to sort of benchmark those things and give you ideas and support you and things. But yeah, huge fan of quizzes. It's a brilliant tool. And the final word on the ed choices, Neil. So you've got Flipgrid, GoNoodle, Microsoft Planner, and quizzes. I mean, do you have a sort of NASA equivalent of awesome?
I have got what I think are the two most underrated tools in the Office 365 suite. Number one is Immersive Reader, which we now use well. And if you haven't used it, Immersive Reader's Office inbuilt accessibility tool can change the speed of text. It can read it out to children. It can display words or sentences in different languages. It's got an inbuilt picture dictionary to it. It can space out words. It can highlight nouns, adjectives, verbs, change the background of the paper that it's on. It's an absolutely fantastic tool that can save teachers a lot of time. Second one is a double whammy. When writing reports this year, for the first time, I used the dictate function on Microsoft Word. It's absolutely brilliant. It's very accurate if you haven't used it before, as long as you speak slowly and clearly. So I dictated all my reports. It took me a fraction of the time that it did before. And then I used the read aloud function, which is kind of part of Immersive Reader afterwards, for the proofreading, and caught the errors far more accurately, because it's actually reading out to you what you've written, so you hear when the mistakes are. I know that sounds like a really simple thing, but sometimes when you read a big wall of text, it's hard to spot an error. But when a voice is actually reading it back to you, the errors are obvious. You can tell where you've missed punctuation, where you've got the wrong word, where a sentence doesn't make sense. So they're my two ed tech and also time-saving tips for teachers.
I think. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Immersive Reader. But I think that's a fantastic little hack there, using Immersive Reader to actually just listen back to stuff afterwards and use it as a thing tool. What's lovely about it too is you could be doing the washing up whilst that's reading it back to you. It frees you from your keyboard, and particularly given how you've been having it in your schools for the past sort of 7-8 months, when you are in front, it is really difficult to see the wood for the trees, isn't it, Neil? With the when you're sort of facing a big wall of text and you've been sitting there for 2 hours writing comments for the 30 students in your class and stuff. So that's a brilliant hack and some great suggestions. We are over time. We are 7 minutes and 21 seconds over time, in fact. So I'm going to start to wrap things up here. But just say a big thank you to our viewers this evening. And if you're watching back, please do feel free to leave comments on YouTube or via mine and Ollie's Twitter. We're always keen to hear from our audience. But huge thanks this evening go to our 3 very special guests who've joined us here this evening. The first is Niall Statham from schools in Dubai, isn't it? We've got Hayley as well from Heartland in Dubai as well. To Vicky Juett from BISAD as well. Thank you, all 3 of you, so much for joining us on the show. And we're back next week, same time, same place. Please hit the subscribe button. When you do that, you can see our up and coming shows. You can choose to get a little reminder, so you get a little notification when the show's about to go live, so you'll never miss an episode. Feedback from our audiences tell us that it's much better to actually engage with the show when it is live. So you can do just as Mark Ryan has done this evening, asking questions like this one we responded to earlier. Such as Danielle sent through earlier. And our guests are always happy, as are Ollie and I, to take on board your questions and comments and things to feed into what we do on the live show. But for now, it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from Ollie. And I'm not going to speak for Neil, Hayley and Vicky, because they've all spoken so eloquently this evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on LearnLiveUAE. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.